Sachin Veerkar, my friend, who has helped us get two eminent speakers, extremely important speakers, very important subjects. I would like to thank him first of all for arranging this thing. Sachin has just come back from Germany, studying an 8-semester course, doing his technology in printing, and he's brought his professors and seniors over here, and we thank them for having made it all the way and being with us and spending their valuable time with us. Thank you very much. And I hand it over to Sachin. Please give him a big hand again, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone. Pleasure to stand here and welcome Matthias from Germany. I'm all the way. I met Matthias the first time when I was doing my internship at Manroland, and I have immense respect for him, for his achievements in a very short time. Matthias started his entry to the printing career was for doing his diploma in print technology, specializing on pre-press and plate making and processing. He then decided to go to the HTM Stuttgart or the Fachhochschule Stuttgart, many names, and specialized on workflows and organization. He started his professional career with Eurographica, it's a consultancy firm specializing on printing business and media industry. In a very short time, he's today leading the strategic investment planning department. It's a big success, big achievement for him. Handling projects everywhere in the world, right from Europe to the US, around the globe, to New Zealand, Australia, over to Asia, again back to Europe. On a personal note, Matthias is my mentor for my final thesis. And he's been an excellent guide for me for 6 months. And please welcome Matthias again.
Thank you very much. And for the Bombay Master Print Association, thank you very much for the invitation, especially for your support in organizing everything. It's a great honor, great pleasure to be here. And I'd like to take you now away a bit from the present. Why? As Sachin already mentioned, I'm working for Eurographica System Planning company, which is a consulting and planning company, originally in the field of newspaper printing. And we developed a kind of special approach in the planning and looking at printing companies. So we developed 5 business units that more or less reflect the whole life cycle, the whole existing and going down or living further of a company, of a printing company. First, it is strategic investment planning. That's when you think about what I'm about to invest, what's the best choice, what's the best solution, what I'm looking on, what should I look on. Then it's the facility planning. You need a place to put everything in there. Then it's production system design, which means more or less fitting together suitable workflows, suitable pre-press, press, post-press developments. Process optimization, if some things are not working that well, you need some support, some help to get things working again. And finally, we do the traditional classical consulting thing for management and organization, which means change management, which means support with mergers and acquisitions, which means management training and interest management and all that kind of stuff. So we try to provide the whole service around printing. And big thing only for printing. We consider ourselves, but in lack of an official statistic or something, we consider ourselves as market leader worldwide, as we are the only company, at least we know, that offers the whole range of these services for the printing industry in the whole world. And I'd like to ask you a question now. You see, this is our view about a printing ground. Create a well-working organism. So let me ask you a question. Who of you owns, for example, a CTP device? CTP? Who of you owns a breast? No matter what size, no matter how many colors? Most of you. Who of you does, let's say, post press in any kind of way, either it's folding, binding, die cutting? Very good. Okay, so just let's forget about this stuff. Forget the presses, forget the binding, forget the pre-press, just forget everything. If you're thinking about investing or building a company, building up a company or going the next step, always keep that organism in mind. You have to look what is the area surrounding the market I will live in or I will operate in. Most of the times we just go, I like that press, send me a proposal. In our view, it's the wrong approach. First, we want to know what is our business, our market. To find out what is the way we should go. And if you look now worldwide, very general picture. If you look worldwide on the printing industry, it is a big mess, very homogeneous, very comparable. I can go where I want to have my brochure print, to have my packages print, to have my whatever. I can go where I want. I have some companies that have very good prices, maybe big compromises on quality, which, side mark, is fair enough. If I offer cheap prices, the customer shouldn't expect to get the 110% quality, because there's always a relation between effort and price. And on the other side, I have companies that specialize in any kind of way. They deliver very high quality and therefore charge more. They deliver special services. They deliver enhancements, die cutting, whatever. They try to create a unique selling proposition. But still, very comparable company. Very comparable homogeneous mass of printing companies. And the latest development we see, especially since the mid-90s, is that this big bubble, this big mass is diverting into low-price companies that try to compete just on price, no matter what price will beat it, and companies that try to retract out of that, okay, we do not go with every price because we deliver something special. Both ways are fine, but, very big but, if you stay in the middle of that, what we call peanuts, this is where the peanut breaks. This is where we're in very high danger and you're about to go down in mid to medium terms in time. So this is looking on the surrounding. We have to find a way where to go. And we have to then figure out some strategic aspects. There must be, if I know where I want to go, I must find out what's the way I want to go there. And now, I'll explain you that later in a second. Let me ask you another question. Who of you has done, within the last, let's say, 12 months, a product mix or product structure analysis? Trying to find out what are my main products, what are the circulations, what are the color distributions, what are the packing agents. Give me a sign. Who did? Oh, that's bad. And you know what? It's the same everywhere in the world. Nobody does. Almost nobody does. And that's for us, a very crucial point. If I try to develop my company, I have to know what I'm producing now, and I have to know what I will, or what I want to produce in a certain time frame, within a certain time frame, let's say 3, 4, 5 years. And this is just an example. That's not a real graph, it's just an example graph. If you would look on each single job and look on it in terms of circulation, means how many copies do I produce, and pagination, that means how many pages does this product have, I'll get a certain kind of cloud. Let's name it cloud. And you already see, when bringing in the paginations, we're not talking about printed sheets. Because I've heard this earlier this day, we are not, as printers, we are not selling printed sheets. We are selling posters, letterheads, postcards, business cards, brochures, books, whatever. We always sell, either we do the binding or finalizing, or an affiliated company, but we always sell final products. Never sell, usually, just printed sheets. So we have to look on what are our product types, and how they are distributed in a certain kind of way. And looking on this one, this for example would be a typical small commercial printer, doing mostly stuff with lower paginations, up to 1632 pages, and in circulations, the amount of copies is up to maybe 10,000. This is a typical area most commercial printers nowadays cover, because this is the come and go products more or less from the industries around and from walk-in customers and all that. Then we have print shops that focus on higher paginations. Let's say from 1632 pages upwards to 256, 300 and more, which means books, bigger catalogs like for industrial uses, big lists of spare parts, all those things, all stuff that needs more pages, a lot of pages, but still not has the big amount of circulation. It's still not the catalog circulation that you usually have for grading houses or something like that. Those means there might be a chance to have bigger press in any kind of way. Then we have companies that focus on higher circulations, a lot of copies. Still small paginations, but a lot of copies, which might be an indication for a web printer or somebody who uses a very fast press, very automated, very sophisticated press to get the throughput. And finally, there are companies that have high paginations, high circulations, so the high volume printers. Many presses, big presses, wet presses, big press parts and machine parts. So we have to find out each one individually. Where I'm located? Which is my part of this product diagram? If I know that, and coming back to the peanut, I have to find my way to go from that product structure I'm at the moment to my aim. And aims might be achieve leadership in cost. Typical thing going to the left of the peanut, left side of the peanut. Other aim might be leadership in quality, right side of the peanut, which means like power control systems and inline systems to control the quality of the production. Everything that is dedicated to allow me a high quality production. And finally, away from the press, service, and this is most of the time very underestimated, service and added value. To take care about the customer, to take him by the hand and to guide him through the whole process. We have to find a way or figure out which is the way we want to go, which is the aim we want to achieve, all with a big aim to leave that endangered zone in the middle of the peanut, that wrecking part. If we know that, we can find out what might be possible alternatives I could go to in the investment in the next step. And here are just a few examples. We have 16-page presses. We have smaller ones, the 8-page presses, the A3 presses. We have the size 6 presses, all different kinds, up to presses with 64 pages and more, and then we have the web pages, web presses, sorry. So we should make up our mind to find out what might be possible solutions that fit on my current product mix and my aimed product mix. So these are the three main prerequisites I need. And then I can start to define my organism printing plant. And I have to do the selection of the organs, more or less, the machinery, based on economic aspects. And I'd like to show you now just in an example how we recommend to do that, because we developed a kind of theory of relativity, not in physics, and you're not Einstein, sorry, but in investment. So what is a statement about economic efficiency? If you get the proposal from the manufacturer, breast manufacturer or breast dealer, the proposal itself, I'm sure, I don't think that allows you a judgment about how cost efficient this breast might be. It tells you something about the breast configuration, the size, the age, or whatever. This is just technical data. Technical data are the amount of steel and metal you get and the price for it. So we have to combine that with each individual specific cost structure. What are the costs I have in my plant, in my company? What are the wages? What are the rents? What are the interest I have to pay? All that kind of stuff. Combine this with the investment to get a rate. Still, it's very easy. It's just an hourly rate calculation. There's no big deal. Everybody can do that. But we already get a first impression, first feeling to find out how good or bad this breast might fit into my plant, into my factory, my company. But then still we need the next step. We have to combine the hourly rates with the productivity and the product costs of that alternative. Because each different equipment has different make-ready times, has different outputs, has different waste requirements and all that. So the costs at the end of the process are totally different. This means we have to have a look on that. And that's why we did the product mix analysis first, to find out what are our main products. And we can calculate and estimate those. And finally, now we take out the big crystal ball, like the old sorcerers, and look into the future till I disinvest again. We try to find out what might be the payback time and the profitability of this alternative. And how big the possibilities and the range in this are, I'd like to show you now in an example. Very easy, hopefully, and if any question comes up, just ask. I'd just like to go through this with an example. Let's have a look on the investment costs. And this is based on Indian cost structure, the index of investment costs for different kind of presses. Very small presses, and I choose the roller presses because we have the possibility to compare from the very small A2 press up to a web press with 16 pages. And all this says is just the different costs for different presses. This is, as I said before, Fred, what do you think, which press is best? Cost-wise? This one? That's the most expensive. So, as I said, we cannot tell just on the costs. But let's do the next step. Let's do an hourly rate calculation. And here, a very big thank you to, where is he, Ramesh Mathak, who helped me to get this data. He helped me out with the Indian cost structure, typical Indian cost structure, and I used this as a basis for this calculation. Some key figures. We used the utilization of 8%. We used the time of use, 7 years, with a residual value of 10%, so you get back 10% of what you invest now after 7 years when you sell the press again. We used the technical overhead of 10%. Technical overhead means the production management, the shift leaders, department leaders that are looking that the whole production is working properly. And we use 8% for sales and administration. It's very low. It's a very, let's say, looking on product costs, a very cost-efficient structure, because usually the wages are much higher. Especially the wages are much higher, and also the overhead costs are much higher. So, in an international comparison, this is, let's say, a manager stream. Utilization? We recommend to achieve 85%, at least 85 plus. It's okay, very good. It's a good average. So it's just a minute. Utilization always, the way we look at it, utilization always goes to the time the breast is manned. People are in the plant and are working on the breast, and from this time we take away all the downtimes, maintenance times, cleaning, all that, and all the rest, the utilization time, more or less, is the time you are producing a job you can sell, printing or make ready and printing. All the money you can charge, all the time you can charge to the customer. Then we used manning according to the breast sizes. So in a small breast, we do not need 3 people, not necessary. Enough people to keep the breast running well in printers before the slash and helpers after the slash. So this means the OB breast would be operated with 1 printer and half a helper. It means there's not just half a guy standing there. No, we did the left half because the other half can do something better. He's just there during make ready or things like that. Maybe 2 presses or doing logistics, paper handling and all this kind of stuff. That's a recommendation. Which really doesn't have a big impact on the cost structure. That's okay. But I think that's what you need at least to operate the press as well. No, that's definitely okay. Absolutely. For the bigger presses, we recommend 1 printer, 1 helper there all the time at the press. And the bigger the press gets, like on the wet press, on the very bottom, 2 press people, 2 printers, and 2 helpers that do all the roll handling and all that kind of stuff, because it's a lot of things to do on a web with a folding device and all that. And you see that the manning is growing with the size of the press, just because the sheets are getting bigger, the piles are getting heavier, the plates are getting more difficult to handle, so we need a bit more manpower. So this is the basis. And we took this into an hourly rate calculation. And forget about all these small things over there. It's just to show that a lot of stuff is included there. The most important part is when looking on this cake, the calculatory depreciation. That's the money I have to earn to cover the loss of worth in my investment. And you see that, based on Indian cost structure, more than 40% of the hourly rate is the depreciation directly influenced by the investment costs. And this still is very good, because looking on European cost structures, half of the hourly rate is personal, and you can have a look on how to cover the rest. So you're still in a very lucky situation. But then again, it shows you how big the influence would be if you invest in the wrong alternative. Having 50% of my costs influenced by the investment and getting the wrong investment just will bring the company down. Because you cannot, if the press doesn't fit to your products, for example, you cannot compete with the competition, because the press will be either too slow or too expensive. You see the big influence on that. And looking on a typical A1 press, full color, like the Roland 704, operated in 3 shifts, press give me your feedback, I got something like 3,200 rupees as an hourly rate. Is that okay? Not enough or too expensive? hourly rate.
One of the printers have open and press.
Use the accounts process. Maybe you can. I think it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. 3 times per hour.
Very good. Thank you. Want to do a quick recalculation? Okay, but you see, this means that we have to cover about 1,500 rupees an hour just to cover the investment cost. I did those hourly rate calculations. Very confusing picture, I know. I will explain it in a second. I've done these hourly rate calculations for all the presses we were talking about earlier. And what you see in here, the lines are the hourly rates of the presses in rupees. Red means operated in one shift. I need some color improvement. The green, which usually is kind of yellow, is the second, is operated in 2 shifts. And the purple one is the hourly rate for the presses operated in 3 shifts. These still are, as I said before, only figures. And to get a first index, I put the output as columns behind those hourly rates. And you see, cheap presses, what a wonder, cheap presses, low output. Expensive presses, a lot of output. Nobody would have expected that. But this again, still just an indication, brought on a basis of an A1 sheet printed on both sides. And if I can do a rough calculation based on that, I get this picture, which tells me if I print an A1 sheet, 16 pages, meter by 70 centimeters, it would cost me about 1 rupee 40. And you see, the costs are not very different. What I have done, because I really was wondering and interested to find out how much benefit a higher automatization of the press would be, I've calculated a standard A1 press and a highly equipped A1 press parallel, which means the equipped one is more expensive but therefore more productive. So you see here, based on this, that the costs are still in a certain range, but this difference is already of 50%. And looking on a perfecting press, 8 color, which would be 1 rupee 60, compared to what's the cheapest one? Size 6 press, where it is 1 rupee 20. Okay, we have 30% difference in costs. But this again is only comparing the productivity to the hourly rates. Remember the third step, the calculation, the estimation of a certain job. And why do I point out that? Because each press has different fixed costs. The graph before only was based on the hourly rate and the index of an output. It takes me much longer to get the make ready on a web press than it takes me to get the make ready on a A3, A2 press or A1 press. Also the output, the variable times, are very different according to the speed and the size of the press. And now we were talking about presses only. For the latest, this is the point where we have to bring in the whole process. We're talking about pre-press, which means at least blade costs for image developed and ready to use blades. We're talking about the press, and we're talking about post-press, which means guillotine, folder, binding, whatever. I've left out binding in here, but I did all the calculation up to the folded sheet. So this is the most important part, because very easily the whole decision of a press investment, for example, is influenced on the available post-press. Is there a suitable post-press fitting in size and productivity or not? This can change the whole decision, just like this, in the wink of an eye. So you see, this is more or less a very standard product calculation you do if you're asked to send a proposal to a customer for a certain job. We take our, based on our product mix calculation, our big jobs, our most important jobs, and do the calculation. We think for the whole process, how long would it take to do the make readies? In pre-press, in press, in post-press. How much will this cost? What are the costs for blades? What are the costs for make ready wastes on the press? What are the costs for proposal to a customer for a certain job? We take our, based on our product mix calculation, our big jobs, our most important jobs, and do the calculation. We think for the whole process, how long would it take to do the make readies? In pre-press, in press, in post-press. How much will this cost? What are the costs for blades? What are the costs for make ready wastes on the press? What are the costs for make ready wastes in the folding and binding devices? And then we estimate just the production, the print runs, the folding runs and the binding runs. How long will this take and what will the material cost therefore? And I did this just as an example again with the main products or most important products. Starting from products with 8 pages up to 512 pages in steps, printed both sides, and circulations from 1,000 to 50,000 copies. So a wide range to get a first impression. And I used the identical utilization. And this again, to have a neutral comparison, because the identical utilization means I have to have enough load to fill all these presses. If I do not have the load, and I cannot fill one of those alternatives, the whole picture changes, because it got much more expensive, right? Maybe then I'm comparing a 3-shift operated A1 press with a 1-shift operated 64-page press. So this picture completely changes, but to get you an indication, I did it on a neutral basis, and this looks like that, and you just see. I'll leave you alone now for, let's say, half an hour, so you can go through all the figures to figure out. But this is just a graph. This is just a result to indicate in green the cost-wise best solution, and in yellow the second best solution. And this, for example, I'll just explain you this graph on one example. I have an easier one to understand after that. This, for example, is an 8-page product, including paper, including waste, including plate, including folding, produced on a A2 press, A1 press, A1 press with high automatization, A1 press with perfecting, on a 32-page press, which is double A1, A0, isn't it? A 7P press, which is a typical book producing size, on a size 8 press, and finally on a web, 16-page web. And you see, what big wonder, it's the easiest way to produce a 8-page product on a A2 press for up to 20,000 copies. Afterwards, it's easier to do work in turn on an A1 press. Big surprise. The same I did for the 16 pages. And this is, I think that's just exactly the same figures. I put it in person. The exact same figures you would achieve if you do the code calculations for your product mix. This means cost-wise best way to produce a 16-page product is an A1 press. There's a certain automatization because it's a bit faster, and in this case it's lower circulation, it's cheaper. So you see there's a lot of figures. The same for higher paginations up to 96. And I wanted to make it a bit easier for you. So I put it in a picture like that. I think that's easier to understand and much better for the eyes because you do not need to look that focused. This shows pages A4, so the equivalent of the size of the product, and circulation in copies. And now let's talk about a product, 4 pages. 4 pages A4, like a cover or something, or leaflet gliders, something like that. Very small circulation, up to 3, 4, 500. Breastfeeding is produced on a A3 press, like a Speedmaster 52, GTO, all the very small devices. Then it's very, very fast. The A4 area is taken over by the A2 press, the 4-product area. This means the small presses are used for very, very small circulations of A4 products, and later only for like letterheads and one-page flyers. In cost, when looking on the costs, only therefore the very small presses are the good solution, the cost-wise best solution. Afterwards, it's a A2 press that takes over the cost leadership. In fact, it's just nothing else but a cost leadership. A2 is 50 by 70. Yeah, or 52 by 74. So just always talking in glasses, in breast glasses or sizes. And here we get a kind of break even at 10,000 sheets A2. So everything I can produce with up to 10,000 sheets A2 is easier done on an A2, or cost-wise better done on an A2 press than on an A1 press. And you might recognize this little peak over here. That's what I thought. This is the 24-page product. You get a kind of a trouble on an A1 press. Should I do twice front and back printing on 2 sections, or do I do 1 section front and back and 1 working turn? What's, Exactly. So for a 24-page product, you just go on a A2 press, do three sections, and that's it. A bit cheaper than doing it on an A1 press. But now we do not only have like A3, A2, and A1 presses. We have a bit more. Like 8, which is a big battleship, available now for something like 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, that's what I wanted to find out. What might be the useful area, suitable area for one.
20 and 40 is the most common largest size available.
40 which is
28 by 40.
Which is okay. That's definitely okay, but you must be aware of looking on this graph. I don't want to push somebody now to invest in a big, very big press, because these are real big battleships, very impressive, real heavy material. But you must be aware, if my main products are in this area, if I'm a producer of catalogs, books, big brochures, and my competition starts to think about a big press, and maybe invests in a big press and a suitable workflow, I will lose, even for small quantities, I will lose this part of my product mix. So as long as nobody else is doing it, everything's fine. But if the competition starts to think about it, I should very fast start thinking about it too. But this is a strategic thing. It's not a must as long as there's no competition. You know? They're competing with the smaller presses. And starting from 128 pages, it's cheaper to produce on a very large press than on a A1 press, for example. And after that, we still have the web for higher circulations, a 16-page web that more or less takes over the whole product range from starting from 35,000 copies, cost-wise, easier and better produced. Except it's 50,000 with a very small product. And this is you may be missing now the 32-page press and the size 7B press, all the sizes in between. They do not compete with those. Not on Indian cost structure. They cannot make a point, and I'll show you I'll show you a European cost structure. This is the same graph. Let's look on this one first. We have the A1 area. You recognize this peak. This is very similar, only that the A2 presses in Europe have a bit more gain in circulation. And up here, this green area is a size 6 press, which means 32 pages A4. And after that, this very little peak over here is a size 7 and 7P press, which means 40 pages, which is not very suitable. And if you then bring in the size 8, it covers the size 6 and size 7 and takes over the cost leadership for everything from 32 pages. And afterwards is the big webs. So you see how the influence of the wages, of the labor costs are. Going back one slide, you see the big area A1 presses cover on Indian cost, based on Indian cost structure, Indian market. And you see how small in this final graph the A1 area is in Western Europe. There's hardly anything left where an A1 printer in Europe really can have a unique selling proposition. He loses a lot of his products if the competition goes into the large sizes.
Sorry, not with you. What's this graph and that graph?
This is only web. And I did this in 2 steps, because in this graph, which is the final one, this whole area where size 6 and 7P press are located is covered by a size 8 press, because this one is even cheaper in production than a size 6 and 7/8 press. But this is just to show that there are areas in Western Europe to run those presses, but at the end they are covered again by the very big sizes. And this is a very strong trend we have at the moment in Europe and in North America, just the same, to go into the very big sizes. It's the same in sheet fed, it's the same in wet fed. So we go into presses with 64, 72, 80 and more pages A4. But Indian cost structure again, this would be the picture. You have to keep in mind, at least for the next 2 weeks till the cost structure in India dramatically changes, the labor costs raise 200%, and yeah, this is the picture you have to keep in mind. When thinking about what's the best way to produce a certain product, and what might be a possible competition. And you're still in a very comfortable situation where a lot of the area is covered by A1 press. Isn't it?
Size smaller than that, that's more popular. Not like A1 press.
Again,
Commercial printing is what 70 by 100.
yeah.
It's not the most popular.
Most popular
That's the most popular? A1? No?
Small
A2?
the 29.
So you have to keep in mind what's the possible utilization I can achieve on the press. Because if you...
I don't know what the reason
Size?
is. Yeah, so that's it. It's at 74.
Yeah, okay.
Pages, number of pages.
Number of pages for commercial printing and packaging it is 3 months CD 128.
It depends very strong on your specific product mix and on the utilization you can get. So this again based on a neutral utilization, neutral cost structure.
28 possible pages, 16 pages. 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8 on each side.
Yeah.
8 on 8.
And one question that very often appears, what's with perfecting? Like those presses with 8 units doing 4 colors, turn the sheet doing next 4 colors. We get a second dimension now in this whole picture, which means time. This is, the blue area is the time I need for printing. Let's get a spectrometer. Blue area is the time I need for printing. Make ready and print run. Green is post-press. Make ready and print production, folding and die cutting, or folding, guillotining and die cutting. And you see, I gain time benefit by doing perfecting. I'm faster in the production. Because this, looking on the column, this is more than this is. While the whole benefit is in print, because this is the same, post-press is the same. But then again, is it worse? And I mentioned earlier today, we have to charge for extra services. That's the right side of the peanut. Cost to produce on a perfecting press is more expensive. This is just an example. It's more expensive than producing on a short press. I'm faster, but it costs me more. So the question is my customer willing to produce to pay more? And we're looking on the big picture. This again is the same product, 16 pages, 5,000 copies. This is what you've seen before. And now we're looking on time. You just should go on a web. If it should be fast, you should do it on a web. And you see the cost development. Cost per thousand is the red line. Cost for additional thousand is the yellow line. A product, very common, 16 pages. Let's go into more pages. 128 pages. And you see there was the break even between the very large sizes and the A1 sizes. This is why we're extremely faster in production. That means even if the hourly rates are higher, production is just done like this. And this is the point where we gain benefit in cost and in time. These are just examples to show those two dimensions. Now, next step, we're still defining the organs of our organism printing plant. Profitability and amortization, payback times. Again, coming back to profitability depends on your product mix. What are the products I'm producing? Just as a mind-keeper. Your margins you get on the job, and the utilization you can provide. And if you look, for example, on the two differences, this is the annual load or load per shift I need on an A1 press. A1 sheet fed press, this is the amount of work I have to do to reach a certain utilization. And this is the amount of work I have to provide, I have to do to get a certain utilization on a wet press. And somewhere between there, we have to figure out your specific situation, and you have to figure out your specific situation. And then select the alternative you like most, cost-wise or technically. And what potential are in there in thorough and thoughtful planning? I'll show you just on a very recent example we did. This is a European printing plant, operating 17 presses at the moment. We have 10 presses in an A1 size, and we have 7 presses in a size 7, which means 40 pages. Very popular in publishing. You see, they're very mixed in color distribution and configuration and things. So they're really producing a lot of stuff. They do 5.5 billion pages, printed pages a year, on almost 500 million prints. This is the annual load, the annual throughput they do. And we optimized the whole product, the whole press part, in terms of economics, and came to this solution. Same throughput, 5.5 billion pages, with a bit more than half the amount of prints, and less than half of the presses. You can imagine what's the benefit in costs. So this is what you can achieve if you align your machinery exactly to your product mix and to your strategic aims where you want to go. This is just not to just buy something because you like it, because I know printers love technique. So if there's a new press or new technique is coming out, it's like, wow, must have this. But keep an eye on your cost structure, on your product mix, because this might mean your survival in business. And we've reduced this specific press count to 4 presses A1 and 4 presses in a very large size 8, coming from 17 presses before. So at the end of this, we have designed or selected our organs in the organism. We know what machinery we need, we know what throughput we need, we know what sizes we need. Let's do the next step. We still need the bones and the skin to put everything in there. This means we have to design, if not already there, we have to design a plant to put everything in. And what usually, if you think about getting a new, or building a new plant, what does usually happen? You go to an architect, the architect tells you, no worries, I'm going to build you a very nice plant, fancy, a lot of glass and whatever. Enough space to put everything in at the end, that will work, no worries, but it will look terribly, very good. Terribly good. We recommend strongly to do it the other way around. We're thinking about a new plant, building a new plant. First, define your process requirements. Define your material flows. Think about what happens in the next 4, 5, or later years. Do I want to expand? No. Never know. What's about the infrastructure on the block I've selected? What about people flow? What about topography? Is it a hill or valley or difficulties? And what are legal regulations? Are I able to build how big I want or whatever? So these are all things you have to think about. Still forget the building at this stage. Because do the next step. We've defined the organs before. Now we arrange them the best way we need. We need to do our product, our production. This means best arrangement of equipment, clear processes, enough storage. Very, very important. Most of the time people just forget to put enough storage in their plant, and afterwards they have to maneuver around all the jobs very often. And not to create loops. And this is just a section of a building we did recently. Here's the incoming paper. These are the presses. You go through the presses, 3 presses over there, plates come in, you go through the presses. We go into binding, folding, guillotining, go into binding, and have the delivery storage over there. You see, these are printing, these are presses. Here's the paper, incoming paper. Here are folding machines. Folding, and here's the bindery. And we can get, there's a way down there, all the finished products in the storage, into the storage, and dispatch it to the lock on this side. This is just an example to show how effective a process can be if you think about it before you place the equipment. Material flow in the building, very big thing. How often do I have to move my paper? Do I have to move freshly printed piles, or can they rest and dry? The real quality issue. So when you have placed your equipment, try to think about what's the material flow in there. Where's the paper coming from? Where's the ink coming from? Where the plates are coming from? Where is it going to? Do I have to do loops, or do I have to move it very often? Just think about it. Take a few hours, think about it. Find bottlenecks. And if you have done all this and defined it and wrote it down, then call the architect and tell him, look, that's what I need, get me the building around. And I do not move 1 little centimeter out of my plan I made here of the process, because the process is what I'm living from, it's not the building. That's a very important part. And you see, you can get as nice buildings as you want. Each architect can get you buildings in each shape you ever want. Don't compromise the process. And now we've done the organism, and maybe it gets ill sometimes. It doesn't really work, doesn't feel well, whatever. So we have to have a look. And process optimization, you heard a lot today about process optimization, and I appreciate it really because it was very good. But what we found out, without going on into the technique, we think that 70 to 80% of potential process optimization, what my colleague did this morning was with very much regards on quality, achieving the best you can get out of the equipment. We find, which is absolutely okay, we find looking on economics, we lose a lot of money just in the infrastructure and the whole workflow around the press. So if you're not talking about quality, if you get in money issues during the production, have a look on your production. Be a shop, be a printing shop. Follow your printing shop through the production and investigate whatever might be a source for delay or for mistakes or whatever. Go through, check all information that is passed through, check all material that is passed through, check all the timing of the whole process. Just follow your jobs to find out what is the part I'm losing money. And I make just a few examples because this is a very complex area. If I, for example, have a lot of downtimes on my presses, what is the reason therefore? It can be broken presses, bad equipment, whatever. The press breaks down and that's it. This is an actual example. It is, definitely.
So just a man roll in and disappear.
He's not running man rolling press.
It's going to be neutral and get both the brands.
Are you selling something?
No? We're completely neutral. This is to show that we do not do Roland or Heidelberg or whatever. We're working in concepts, not in brands. But you see the downtimes, breakdown times of the presses when the machinery fails. That's a certain amount of time, whatever. But you see much more organizational problems. Waiting for plates. How much time do my printers spend waiting for plates? By the way, I can tell my printer, hey, if your plates are at the press, just go and take it. Get it on your own. That's the problem. And what's the time I need or I lose in waiting for paper? Same problem. Just organizational and logistical problems. And very often, at least in Europe, printers say, I'm a printer, I'm not looking for plates. I'm a printer, I'm not looking for paper. Get everything to my press, and then I do my job. And you have to tell them, hey, you're a printer. If your press not working, you do not earn money. So either you're looking for the stuff, or we cut down your wages. Not really. One example. This is one example. So everything is every hour, every single hour of this means lost money for me as a company, as printing company. Utilization, we're not talking about utilization before. We recommend, based on the manned hours that people are on the breast, where the breast should be operating or is operating, we recommend to have at least 80% utilization time. It means time I can charge to the customer on a job. If I have only small utilizations, this means I'm not covering my costs because I have calculated my hourly rate on a certain utilization, and if I do not reach that utilization, I'm just losing money because the real costs are higher than what I'm charging. So I have to find out why. Why does this happen? Why do I not reach the utilization I need to have? Do I not have enough work? That's possible. Do I have to acquire more jobs from the market? Or are just my people a bit lazy? Possibly, never know. Just have an eye on it.
You might have a recording system, and not working because of that recording system. That's a big question.
There are different systems available. You have the machine systems like Pico has, I think. You have the job tracking systems. There are several systems on the market. At least you can do what we call the job tickets. Job tickets and production reports. People have to fill out, I was working on job X, Y, Z for so and so many hours, you know, like the daily reports they have to do. So there are certain stages of recording you can do, certain automatization grades. Depends on the size again of the factory, of the company. Or what very often happens, especially combined with decreasing utilization, that the average speeds, the average outputs of the presses go down. Why does this very often come with decreasing utilization? Because the printer thinks, I have enough time today, I mustn't hurry, I can do that job very slowly, no worries, enough time till lunch. So he says, okay, let's run it a bit slower, that's okay, still enough. But again, I have a bad utilization and I'm spreading the time I need for a job, even worse. So we have to kind of track the performance of our plant. What's our output? And if there are big changes, we have to at least to find out if these are market-driven because I do not have a job at the moment, or if these are internal problems. Material flow and handling. Who of you knows how much waste he's producing? Company is producing. Any waste tracking or any records about how much waste, how much kilos and tons of paper you lose? You do? Very good. Everybody should, and if it gets too much, have a close look. Have a close look in your print plant, in your factory. Does it look like that? Everything's just no, not India. That's not India, but it looks the same everywhere in the world. It's not China. No, it's not Oxford. This in fact is South Africa. But you see, you never can sell this stuff. This, maybe you could sell it, but do you find the job you're looking for again? No, I'm not quite sure about that. This one, just throw it in the bin. This, you never can get this paper for recycling again if there's the rest of lunch and everything in there. That is the bin, more or less, yeah. That's the only way you can put it. Have a look on that, how much money you're losing on that. And tell people to treat the stuff, to treat the paper in a proper way. Because most of the time, in most of our jobs, 50 to 60% of the costs are determined by the paper or the cartonboard. So again, just based on a few examples, a profit you can get out if you do a process optimization, or have at least a close look on what's really going on. Think about if you increase your production time for several hundred or thousand hours. These 2,700 hours are actual current real project results. We increased the production of a breast part for 2,750 hours, just by getting the process optimized. If you can reduce the overs and the waste for a certain amount, a certain percentage, and if you can reduce the redos, the jobs you have to print again because there was something wrong, or the color didn't match, or whatever. Sometimes the customer comes back and says, I don't like it, I don't take it, do it again. Just think about how much money you could save if you have a rational, a clear look on what's going on in the factory. So, as a summary, final recommendations. Always try to have a flexible but cost-efficient factory. It means do the economic analysis, product mix analysis, base it on your strategic aims, your investments. Never rely on the first impression. Because all the breast producers, they have real fancy brochures. Breasts are looking very nice in each single brochure, each single prospect. And think of your factory as a print organism and try to keep it healthy and fit. Always keep asking questions yourself. Always ask yourself, is it necessary that the paper is coming in there and going out there? If the press is then the other way around? Is there a way to improve that? Things like that. The small and little improvements bring in the money after time. So take on the white skirt and be the medical doctor of your company. Listen to the heartbeat of your company and find out what's going wrong in there. So far from my side, thank you very much for your attention.
It's been an international, very interesting presentation here.
Thank you.
I'm sure most of us are used to handling smaller quantities. What is important for all of us to just understand.
Just speak on that. I'm sure you know. Just try. Yeah, keep going.
It's okay?
Yeah, no, the height is the problem.
Hello. The volumes that were present over here might have been a bit larger than what we are used to handling or used to seeing. But what is important is the concept behind it. But that's the same. It doesn't make any difference if you have a polyman or if you have a high-inverse speed mass 52, 74 size. It all comes down to the same thing. It filters down. Do you really need that machine? What is where am I want to take? Where do I want to take my organization to? It's not just getting carried away by brands and just fancy have a CD logo there or have a 706, because it just leads to overcapacity in the market, nothing else. And I think we are all at a situation right now where a lot of investment will be made. It's very fortunate that we are all here and want to strive and invest more. But I think it's very important for all of us to really give a substantial thought to what we just presented. It's not just consulting chartered accountants and looking at do I have finances, what are the interest rates. It's also important, is the machinery really required for my press, for my company. So I think Matthias contributed a lot here in giving a very good, very thoughtful, very substantial thought. I'm sure we all benefit out of it. I'm sure all of us must be, or a lot of you must be wanting to ask some questions. Please. Anyone? Or have we had the round of questions during the presentation here?
What are the typical print runs in a commercial printing house in, say, Germany?
In a typical printing house, depends on what you're looking on.
Say just commercial printing, publicity material and brochure.
We have very, very strong decreasing average circulations in all fields of printing, which means we are producing smaller jobs, but therefore more. At the moment, the average circulation is about, looking on typical commercial things like flyers, and no big brand things, but the typical production is around, or is between 7,500 to 10,000, 12,000 copies. So this is a very typical size in commercial.
I have another question. A lot of our customers, suppose the print run is 5,000, and they want almost exact to 5,000. If you print 5,200, they will not accept 200 extra.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're significantly, less than 5,000, say 4,600, they will say that make up the difference. Now, obviously, in a printing press, you cannot completely get to 5,000.
No.
And this typically is a problem a lot of us face. Do you have any, suggestions on how could one, get around the situation?
You should allow a certain percentage, a certain variation by your business.
He asked me the short form in German, and I'm telling the full form in German. The conditions on which you, terms and conditions.
Thanks. Okay. You should allow a certain percentage, plus and minus, in your terms and conditions. And to align to that, you should do a kind of production records to find out what's my typical waste I need, the typical make-ready waste I need, the typical production waste I have, going backwards through the production, from post-press to finally the press, till you know at the beginning how much paper to order, because that's the next step. I have to order a certain amount of paper, and if I over-order, I lose money again. If I over-order a lot. So you never, but this is something the customer just have to accept. There's no process you really can do like 5,126 copies and one extra for me because all the rest are guests. It just doesn't work.
What is the practice in Germany?
The experience is that we have, by law, a variation of almost 10%, which is in terms and conditions, and that most companies have a not too bad record, or at least a not too bad feeling about how much waste they need. So they run typical jobs, they know very well how much waste I have to expect, and if they do like extraordinary jobs, they cannot really estimate it. Okay, let's get 1,000 sheets or whatever extra, just to be on the safe side, because it's cheaper to waste those 1,000 sheets than to make ready again and to do the whole production again. But they try to standardize very, very much.
I have a question. You've seen that the labor rates are low in India. And if I automize, you have, say, a 4-color press. They have 2 offerings. Let's say there's a standard model, basic, everything manual. And then they have a fully automated version, which has all the bells and whistles and all the labor-saving devices. So, obviously that will make me more efficient, but which one, I didn't quite get it in the graph, but how do I decide in my context, in the Indian context, should I invest in the bells and whistles and pay that 30-40% more? Or should I stick to the standard model and make money?
Yeah, good question, because now I noticed that I missed that out to explain it in detail. The graph showed that if you're doing lower circulations, smaller circulations, bigger changeovers, exactly, you better go for the high automated press. And I calculated here an optimized press, make-ready optimized press, make-ready optimized process, which allows me to do fast make-readies.
That's even with low cost of labor.
Even with low cost of labor, because you can do more jobs during your production time. So that's the main benefit. But when the circulations get bigger, Then it's cheaper because the print run itself is the determined part of the production costs. And it's cheaper to go on a low automated press because the effect of make ready is not that big, not as big as with a shorter press. Right.
I have a question. What you said right, absolutely right, because I want the machinery automation and productivity and improvement. That is a factor to go for that. The second question was one graph which you showed. It was 1 and it was about 9 between the web and the sheet fed. I think there's a very vast difference.
That's different presses between in there?
Yes. One was a sheet fed and one was web, but the difference was almost 8 times in productivity.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a surprise.
That was the amount of work you need to achieve the same utilization on those.
8 times more.
Yep. And this was let's say, a low budget web press, a small one, a cheaper one.
What was the speed that you calculated?
The speed
The average speed for the web press?
The average speed,
No, the calculation what you made.
the average speed for the web was in impressions 39,000. 39,000 impressions as a
39,000 impressions.
per hour after make ready, without make ready.
The other question, the other quick question was, we always have this dilemma of should I buy a brand new press at a very high premium, or should I buy, say, a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old press at a lower cost? And how much does that impact my my cost of production?
Very much, very much. If you remember this cake diagram before, where almost half of the cake was determined by the investment costs. You can imagine if I take off half of the investment costs, I take half of this part of the cake, and the whole cake will get smaller. So this really has a big impact. But on the other hand, you have to have a look on what are my typical products. Is it suitable? Is it okay if I do them on a older press? Because usually they are not as good in quality, they are not as good in register and all that kind of stuff. They do not allow you to really produce as good as you could do with a new press. So this again depends on your market. Are you more into come and go products, which is okay, absolutely, where I cannot charge as much for, or I'm a high quality printer who sells for good money, but therefore has to deliver a good quality.
I think if you really know the cost of the new press, and if you really know what kind of price you can demand from your customers, with this with this calculation, what you just made, one should come to a reasonable solution.
You can do what the easiest way you can do is like to do those calculations both ways. Calculating the use press on the one hand, calculating the new press on the other hand, and you see the effects in throughput, in cost and all that. Productivity and cost.
In a growing market and growing competition and the recession what we face in India, is it theoretically right to consider sunk cost?
To concentrate?
Sunk cost? Sunk cost.
Because we are brand new and the second hand, what you said.
No.
After you said the
Sunk cost is, I think, if I'm not wrong, the cost when your machine is idle and you are waiting for a job. To consider to fill that capacity, to lower down your rate, is it theoretically right to consider the sunk cost in your costing?
Yeah, just take it. 80% utilization is only 20% you have taken, 80% idle you've taken already. Calculation. Our calculation is
cost of the machine waiting for the
80% of the utilization.
Yeah, 80% of utilization.
that is the cost of time waiting for a job. The machine is just
Yes,
waiting because there's just no job.
But yeah, not just no jobs, it's all the time you need to cycle people. You need cleaning times, you need maintenance times, all that kind of stuff, where you just cannot produce. So this is really, it's an impact. In Europe, we even hire external companies to do all the cleaning and maintenance on the weekends when the press are not operating, to bring up the utilization, the available time.
overbuying must be twice as much. to the maintenance guys?
Yeah, they're not very cheap.
My question was a little different. I'm not talking about the theoretically right solution that is 80% utilization. Sometimes when we face competition and when we see the costs are very low, then the argument from a fellow competitor can be, I'm considering my sunk cost, and instead of keeping my machine idle, I'm doing the job at a very low rate, which is lower than cost. I want to ask you a theoretical question that whether theoretically it is right or he is doing a bigger mistake for the future.
He does a big mistake for the future.
Exactly that I want to
Because this is what happens very much in Europe at the moment with a lot of overcapacities. Everybody's just competing on price. And you know what? You know how a typical European printer does his estimation. If he's asked for, I want to have 5,000 brochures. He says, 5,000 brochures, what kind of paper? Okay. Let's say 2,000 euros. Customer says, but the competition says it's only 1,500. Okay, we get it for 1,300. That's the same all over the world. And just to get jobs, especially when looking on the big companies that run several labs and have a lot of presses, and depending on commercial work, that's a very bad thing. They're just competing on price. They're just competing on price. They're not looking on their own costs. They're just competing on price, just to get a job, or just not to have the competition getting the job. You know, they're bringing down the prices more and more and more. And we say, typically, the biggest mistake ever a printer can do when investing into a new press, into more capacity, into faster production, into lower costs. The biggest mistake he can do is to forward it directly to the customer, to his customer. It's the biggest mistake he can do if he gains some cost savings and directly put it on his prices, forward it to the passing on to the customer. I have a big customer in Europe. He changed his whole press plant and really saves a hell lot of money now. And he told no one of his customers. They're still thinking he's printing on the same old press as he did before. And each single job he is writing the bill, he's just laughing, you know, because he's making real big money.
Is there any conscious effort taken by institutes like the Bundesverband meeting, something similar like the BMPA on the national level? Is there a conscious effort made to stop dirty competition in Germany?
Not really. Not really. They try to stay out of the market, yeah.
I'd like to continue with that. I mean, my question is, we are in a perfectly competition scenario. We are not in an oligopoly situation. The printers over here. So there are medium-sized printers and small-sized printers. There are many in number. So the competition is always cutthroat. Now, that what makes us, I mean, we are low investors. So we are also not the lowest cost producers or manufacturers. How is China placed against this? And are there any job migrations happening in Europe or in US to some low-cost producers?
There's some work going to China, definitely, which in my eyes has to do with the awareness of China. Everybody sees China as the big new market, and most people underestimate India. It's my personal meaning. So I think honestly, I do not know exactly the cost structures of China because I never had a project there. It's very difficult to do something there. But in my feeling, there's not a very big difference. And personal feeling is that the fact is that the social and the political structure here in India is much more stable than in China. So if somebody is asking me, I would recommend to rather invest in India than in China. But more. This was not on purpose. Honest meaning.
But frankly speaking,
So it's, if somebody is asking me, I would recommend to rather invest in India than in China. But more. This was not on purpose. Honest meaning.
But frankly speaking, what is exactly happening is the big organizations like HLL has a big resource. So number of jobs of HLL are many more. If they find China to be cheaper, definitely they are going to shift their production to China. They are definitely not going to stick around with Indian printers. Is that situation arising anywhere in the world? I mean,
I have several.
Something that you should know, that in India there are enough printers who are giving China for their money. A huge number of them. And when Eddie was there at that seminar, you were there. You were there. I was there for yes.
Yeah, I think a huge number of printers in India are actually giving China money. The only difference is we are not just aware of them. You don't know that? Yeah? No, competing in the international market, yeah.
One last question.
Hello. We heard today on two presentations on digital printing. What is your opinion on digital printing as such? To what extent is it going to affect the typical offset market?
Good question. Personal or not just personal, working on a lot of projects, a lot of companies I know. I think the real impact of digital into offset is very small. Because what happens is not like that the digital is taking away a lot of production from offset. It does in some small areas, you know. But digital, my meaning is digital printing allows to create new markets, extra markets, and a lot of products are produced today on digital, which is shown by the big growth in the digital area. A lot of products are produced today because they can be produced on a certain cost level, and they wouldn't have been produced before, or if digital printing wasn't available. So I think digital is not a substitute for commercial.
Open new markets. It's open new markets.
It opens new markets. On the other way, commercial printing is not really a substitute for digital too, because it's a different market. And I think it's a good opportunity for printers to have both. But I don't see a big competition between both, which is shown by the general development in printing, that the presses are still getting always bigger and longer and more automized, and having more throughput and more jobs again. The only looking on the general printing market, it's growing everywhere except in Europe.
On this note, I'd like to thank Matthias.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us. We had a small token of appreciation to Matthias.
Thank you, Sachin.